imprisoning people for their sake, the country's sake. We're imprisoning people for some selfish reason that we're kind of not discussing, because there has to be a reason why America can be considered so dangerous by Americans, yet have so many people in prison, like percentage wise, you know what I mean? So we have to address the fact that there are so many people incarcerated right now, and like look into that problem a little bit deeper.
Today we're going to start off talking about the high incarceration rates in prisons, along with the overcrowding, because that has been currently happening in prisons in California and all over the United States itself.
Basically, what's happening is that when did this start? Like, mass incarceration wasn't really a thing. Does anyone know the exact year?
I have an idea, because I've heard of the war on drugs, I believe, which was around the 1980s. I think it was Clinton. He passed a crime bill, for this mass incarceration. It was I know that a lot of people with drug related crime offenses, like drug possession alone, they a lot of them got sent straight to prison. They were incarcerated. That's one example I can think of, as for high incarceration rates.
There are also a lot of over policing in poor communities, or the Black and brown communities, so that could also be another factor of high incarceration.
Crack was distributed on the city streets with the city streets, which was mainly the Black and brown communities. And so because crack was deemed dangerous, many people, Black people and Hispanic or Latinx people, were incarcerated for the possession of crack. And the reason why this was insane was because there's also cocaine going around, but where cocaine was going was typically in white communities, but they weren't evenly incarcerated, such as the POC communities.
I think there was an article about how both POC and white people, they did the same amount of drug crimes, or drug related crimes, but we all know that people of color are more likely to be incarcerated than their white counterparts, but that's why more people, or more Black people or Latinx people, they were being more incarcerated, but they were doing the same. There was the same rate of crimes within both communities.
Cocaine is much more potent and it's like cocaine or heroin, something like that, is way more powerful than crack, or something along those lines, right? Are they? Because I had heard that one of them was more expensive and
more addictive and more expensive.
Mm-hmm. I think that was the one that
passed as the pure form of cocaine, because it was uncrushed and refined.
Something like that. But I think the reason it was a big deal.
You can, for heroin, you could shoot up or snort it, and for cocaine, you just snort it. That's from what I know.
Yeah. The only reason I bring it up is because it was whichever one is stronger or whatever, more expensive, is the one that was handed out in the white neighborhoods, and they were not getting penalized.
For many years, it was cocaine. Going back to when Pablo Escobar was alive, that's where it was mostly coming in from Colombia, going towards Miami, and doing those summer breaks, because kids want to have fun back then, right? So that's where it was mostly heading towards, and it was mostly cocaine in that type of area.
That's why often when people talk about crack usage, they don't talk about some fancy penthouse living white person using it. They talk about some person who's down on their luck, living homeless, that kind of stuff, who has no money, that being the only kind of stuff that they can afford, because cocaine was used by richer, more affluent people. And like you said, April, they don't get incarcerated for this stuff, although technically it can be a lot worse. But that's both like a view of like prejudice in the justice system and like white supremacy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like for that, it like really depends on the police officer, the judge, the jury. It like really depends on like what, like some juries can be really biased and some cannot, and like it really depends on like what type of jurisdiction type they want to. Yeah, that's the word. On what they want to do, saying if you're guilty and not guilty, and sometimes their opinions can actually be wrong or right.
I want to ask, like, how do you guys think that we should, or how the criminal justice system should go about kind of resolving this problem? So we are dealing with, like, you know, obviously we're dealing with a racial problem here, but we're also dealing with, you know, mass incarceration for drugs. As for what I was thinking that, like, on the topic of drugs, I think that there can be different ways to treat this problem in prison.
I don't have a solution like that I can think of, but you also have to keep in mind that, like, another thing about mass incarceration is the whole, like, you know, like prison factory work kind of thing. Like, you know how like a lot of the things that get made in our day-to-day lives are actually made by incarcerated folk and like prisons and stuff. And that's also a big issue we need to deal with.
What do y'all think? Because it's COVID now, right? And obviously that's a large group of people in a very small area. Like, I don't know,
many prisons are like getting COVID-19 infected. So the people who are infected, they probably put to one side of one unit and the other positive, negative, and the people are recovering. But that's what I've heard. I'm not sure if that's true.
Do they put like the infected people in like solitary confinement to contain the virus, or what do they do if it's gonna spread so quickly?
I do think prisons have like some type of quarantine system already, because of course coronavirus is not the only infectious disease you have to worry about in prisons. But from what I remember a lot of like high security Californian state prisons, like San Quintino, back like mid last year, they would do these things where like when they started getting like breakouts, like infectious breakouts and stuff, they would move their non-infected inmates to other prisons across the state to, you know, lessen the load of like less people getting infected. So obviously they aren't ready to handle the amount of sickness that can come from such a highly infectious disease in such a small contained area. So obviously they're doing something wrong there. So yeah,
it's also not talked about a lot, and it's not like really reached the media about like what they're doing. Like, for example, a rapper that's been here for a while, I don't know when he started his career, 6ix9ine Tekashi, I think that's his name. He got out because of his asthma, I believe, and like he was like more prone towards the coronavirus, and they released him.
First of all, you got to realize this is really an American-only problem. Like, if you look up prison populations around the world, like, no, I'm serious. This is an American-only problem. If you look up prison populations around the world, the percentage of people that we have in prisons compared to other countries is insane. And then you look at like the situations that we hold people in. Again, it's very much insane. So obviously, we're not imprisoning people for their sake, the country's sake. We're imprisoning people for some selfish reason that we're kind of not like, you know, discussing, because there has to be a reason why America can be considered so dangerous by Americans, yet have so many people in prison, like percentage wise, you know what I mean? So we have to address the fact that there are so many people incarcerated right now and like look into that problem a little bit deeper.
It's not like only that. It's like some people who falsely got accused are in prison for rape and stuff. That happens. And that stuff is actually real life changing, because you might have not did it and you're still in prison. You're deemed as this person who did this crime. And there still are a lot of dangerous people in California, in the United States itself. Like, not every dangerous person is going to be in jail or in prison or in juvie. Like, it's not possible. You're not going to catch every single bad person in the world, but you have to like look for it, because there are dangerous spots in America. There are dangerous areas in America, and it's just not only just like a one state problem. It's all America. Like, if you compare our prison system to any others in the country, you'll see that ours is actually treating them like they're nothing, like they're trash.
If you were a legislative person, or I forget, I wasn't paying that much attention in that political science class, whichever branch makes the laws and wrote them, which piece of mass incarceration, like the issue, would you want to start with as your first bill or whatever?
I feel like racial issues, since
Obviously, we know a lot of the, incarcerated people are POC, Black, Brown. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a vague, not a solution, but something that we can do is like review the practices or policies that are, set, that we may not know are racially inequity, like, of course we have like an unconscious bias. We know what that is, but a lot of these practices or policies that are made by the criminal justice system, they disproportionately affect more POC than white communities, and therefore more POC are incarcerated, right? So I feel like we can try to tackle, that aspect of it, which would help, like, just in general, because most incarcerated people are POC.
Yeah, I also feel like we should add, like, to that part is like how many cases go off eyewitnesses instead of evidence, and that's like something that causes a lot of cases to go say, oh, guilty, because we believe this person, or like there's not enough information for this case. I feel like that's like some reasons why some people are in prison or being falsely accused or not in prison, because there wasn't enough evidence. So I feel like there should be like something a part of that system.
Also, it's very hard for, people who do their sentence and then they're released back into society to function in society. Like, it's really hard for, when you have, when you're trying to get a job, for example. Like, it's really hard for people who have been in prison to try to find a way to turn their life around, because not a lot of, places want to employ someone who, has been in prison. So I feel like for them in that such situation, it's easier for them to go right back into the system, which again contributes to the high incarceration rates. So I feel like we could also improve how we prepare them back into society.
To give them, just a better opportunity to turn their life around.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing, because once you enter the criminal justice system, it's very hard to get out of it, because within like less than 2 years you could reoffend. Yeah, you could reoffend, but even before they're released, they don't have the prison system doesn't have enough resources for them to even have the opportunity to I guess be more normal, or like, yeah, go back to society. And when they're trying to turn their life around, they're gonna, like, companies or job applications or whatever, they're gonna shut them down because they saw them that they were a criminal, they were, they did a crime. So even then it's gonna be hard for them. So, like, yeah, resources in prisons, we need to have more of that, because that's how they could function outside when they're released,
It's so frustrating because like I imagine someone who's like trying to turn that around or just being incarcerated and you can't get a job. Like,
yeah, it's like, how are you
I
going
mean,
to
to be
bash
fair,
people and then not give them the opportunity to make themselves better? Basically, it doesn't make sense.
what sucks is that it's also like, dang, because that's on their record now, and obviously if they did do something wrong, then it would be hard for an employer to trust. So I don't even know, like I honestly say that, but then I'm like, dang, I don't even know how I would go about doing that, because it has to do with like the character. That just boils down to like the character of that person, honestly. But then it's hard to, I don't know, it's complicated.
With longer sentencing, it's harder for the inmates to get a proper education or to develop such skills that the jobs want in a person, you know? So like they can't develop, you know, like these skills or these characteristics if they're going to be locked up for so long with little to no services to even help them rehabilitate from the crimes that they did.
And with that, Pia got the last word and the last sentence of this podcast. So we're going to send it off to Pia so she can do the outro and say goodbye.
Okay, so that wraps up today's episode of high incarceration rates and overcrowding in prisons. So what are your guys' thoughts about the prison system, and what can we do as a society to prevent what's happening? And yeah, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and follow us at Project Batu on Instagram and on Facebook. So this is Law and Order signing out. Bye.
Bye.